Florida Insurance. And as you can see, was just what just got popped up there is we are going to be recording this for people who are not able to attend tonight. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for being with us. Amanda has some slides that she is going to talk about. And if you have questions after she talks about a slide, just raise your hand or use the reactions button to raise your hand. And I'll call on you, and she will answer your question as we go along. She'll answer a question based on where we are in the presentation. Much, Amanda. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Well, like you said, my name is Amanda Boge. I'm a co-founder of My Florida Insurance. Started the agency back in 2013. So we've weathered a few storms. Most recently, of course, Hurricane Ian. We were fielding claims calls from a local grocery store the day after the storm and have taken over 1,500 claims. So hopefully I can help answer some of your questions that you may have and go over some of the ones that we see most frequently in our agency. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So just give me a minute.
People are on here.
Okay. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what I'm going to go over today is flood versus hurricane, which is a very common one that we see. Wind-driven rain, what an AOB is, a supplemental claim, loss assessment, and loss of use. And then at the end, we'll open it up to your generic questions. So I'll do a brief explanation of each slide. And then if you guys have any questions on the specific topic, then just let me know and I'd be happy to answer any questions. So first we'll start out with the big one, flood versus hurricane. So flood, of course, is rising water from the outside. The easiest way to think about a flood is if you're standing in your driveway and the water's coming up into the home. This is not typically covered on your standard home insurance policy. It's a separate policy. Most people have the FEMA or the NFIP flood coverage. Some questions that we've got as far as coverage goes, there's no loss of use coverage, unfortunately, on this policy. So if your home is uninhabitable because of the flood waters, there's no coverage to cover your extended stay at another place or going out to eat. So that was a big one that we've seen come through here. Also, there's no coverage for pool equipment coverage. And then the personal property on a flood policy is depreciated value. So many of our clients do not have this coverage because you pay a lot of money and you're not getting a lot of coverage. Now, with that all being said, there are some private markets that are available now that were not previously available. This is really just come after Hurricane Irma, and they do have options for loss of use, full equipment coverage, replacement cost on contents. But that being said, there can be a lot more expensive, but there are options. So this is kind of a new thing in the market. So it's something to definitely explore if you are wanting to have a more comprehensive policy. Not everybody's eligible, but it's something that we can definitely look into for you. With the hurricane portion, so a hurricane is going to be a named hurricane. Within typically a 72-hour period is how the insurance companies look at it. So if you have damage to the home from wind within a 72 hours of the storm, they consider that hurricane damage. Typically their home, the deductible is 2% of your dwelling. So just for example, if your home was insured for $500,000, you'd have a $10,000 deductible. This is only for the wind portion of the claim. So even if you have, a lot of times people say, well, oops, skip that one. Let me see if I can go back. So with that hurricane coverage being said, the deductible is 2%, and that's a little bit higher out of pocket expense. And then the last part of that slide was about the screen enclosure coverage. That is a separate coverage that you have to purchase on the policy. It's not typically automatically included. So that's something that's really important if you do have that pool cage, that you purchase extra coverage for hurricane losses. So does anybody have any questions on flooding or hurricane or the difference between the two? No.
Amanda, let me ask just a question regarding lifts. Oftentimes well, whether it's a condominium or single-family home or otherwise, may have a lift for disability access or otherwise, or an elevator. Where do those typically fall within the confines of a flood versus a wind policy?
So the elevators are typically the flood because the damage to the elevator itself, what's making it not function is typically flooding. So we saw that a lot with the condo buildings as well. The reason why the condos are uninhabitable is because they can't get the electrical back on, not because of wind, but because of flood. So this storm was very different, as you all know, from Hurricane Irma, which was primarily a wind storm, where this one had severe flooding.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on hurricane and flood?
Amanda, could you just show that again, the 2%
You know,
thing?
Yeah, sorry, and I don't know how to get back to that other slide, but basically, so the 2% deductible, so if your home is insured for 500,000, just using round numbers, your hurricane deductible would typically be 10,000, which is 2% of the dwelling amount.
Okay,
And that can vary. Sometimes it could be 5% if you're in a high-risk area. Sometimes they make a higher deductible. And then sometimes on the newer constructed homes, they may offer a lower deductible, but the standard Florida deductible for hurricanes is 2%. One thing we will have to watch moving forward is currently that deductible typically is just for named hurricanes. Some of the carriers are changing the policy verbiage where it's going to be any wind or a named storm, which could also include a tropical storm or a tropical depression. So you may have that high deductible, high out-of-pocket expense, not just for hurricanes, but named storms or other wind storms. So that's something that we're going to want to monitor in the future. And when you're comparing policies, to the average eye, you may say, okay, these policies look the same, but then there's the fine-tuned details like that, where one may have a named hurricane deductible, and the other one, you have that deductible for all windstorm, which can make a big difference in your out-of-pocket expenses.
so
And
500,
Amanda, is the 3% applied across the board? So for example, if you had X amount on your building, for wind, and then there was a contents coverage package as well, and then oftentimes there may be another structures package as well.
Yeah.
Does a policy, it typically will take that in total and then apply that percentage deductible to that total amount of coverage, or might it be separated by the contents versus the building, for example?
Yep. So the deductible doesn't go off the amount of the loss. It's the amount that your home is insured for. And that deductible, the neat thing about a hurricane deductible is it is a calendar year deductible. So, knock on wood, hopefully we wouldn't get hit by more than one storm in a year. But if we did have more than one storm, let's just at 10,000.
Tonight, or are you?
Yes.
Old meeting.
The $10,000 deductible applies to, so let's say you have 100,000 in damage to your home, 50,000 in contents, 20,000 in other structures. They're going to take that whole claim, and that $10,000 deductible applies to the whole claim.
Thank you.
Amanda,
Yes.
so you were saying that with the newer policies now, they're thinking about a wind for like a tropical storm. So say we had a tropical storm in August, and then all of a sudden we got hit with a hurricane. I mean, I don't want to jinx this, but a hurricane in October.
Yeah.
So then you've had wind only in August, but now you got wind in October too. Does that mean that deductible would stay, or do you have to do another deductible because it's a hurricane with wind, as an example?
So how they are currently, it would be, just say your regular deductible is $2,500. It'd be $2,500 for the first loss and $10,000 for the second loss. What they are proposing with doing the hurricane and wind all together, that would be one deductible for the calendar year. So let's say you had 8 in damages from the tropical storm in August, you didn't meet your deductible, you still want to report those damages, because then let's say there was a hurricane in September and you had, another 10,000 in damages, you would only be short the 2,000 for your deductible. So it is nice to have the calendar year deductible, but you also, if we just had the wind, it's nice to have the lower out-of-pocket expense.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so wind-driven rain. This is a big one that we got both with Irma and with Ian. Typically, this affects the waterfront properties. Wind-driven rain is typically not included on your policy. So this is where the hurricane force winds drive the rain through the seals of your windows and doors and cause interior water damage. There are a handful of companies that cover this, but most people change the verbiage after Irma, and they require there to be a physical opening in the structure. That could be a broken window, a broken slider, roof damage. But if there's no physical hole in the home or the windows, then typically the wind-driven rain is excluded on the policy. We see this even with impact glass. The impact glass does a great job of preventing breakage. However, the 150-mile-an-hour winds with the rain, it still manages to get through the property. So, does anybody have any questions on wind-driven rain?
Go ahead.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for your
Hello.
presentation.
Yeah.
I have a condo on the 10th floor and we took a direct hit. So I have wind-driven rain damage because the roof was damaged. We also had a 12-foot surge, but my insurance company is denying coverage for under homeowners because they're saying that it was due to flooding, which was true. So how do we ever determine where the damage came from? I'm out of my condo unit now for up to a year while they mitigate
Right.
and repair the damage, because there's moisture in the walls from the rain and the wind and the flooding. So how do you ever prove which came first?
Right, that's a tough question. Are you on the top floor?
10th floor.
Is that the top, or
Nope.
are there more?
There are floors over me.
Floors over? Okay, so if the water came through from a roof leak, and there is a potential for coverage there, that would be something where the location of where the water came from, you'd probably have damage at the ceiling mark. That would typically be included in the policy. The wind-driven rain, if it came through the sliders, is typically not covered. And then also the flooding is typically not covered. The other issue, like with what you're having, is the loss of use, which will be another slide. The reason why the building is uninhabitable is due to the floodwaters ruining the electrical, them not being able to power the building, and that's not covered on a condo policy. All right. So this is a big one that we get, AOB, or assignment of benefits. Basically what this means is you're assigning over your policy rights to a third party. When you do this, you are giving up all your policy rights. Your agent can no longer speak to you regarding the claim. They can no longer follow up or check in with their agent, their carrier relationships that they have. Basically, you've just given up all rights. The other thing is the payment will go directly to the company that you have assigned over. So unfortunately, we see companies that come in, they get the payment and they don't finish the work. At that point, there's nothing that the insurance company can do for you or your agent because you've signed over all of your policy rights. We saw this, it was rampant during Hurricane Irma. I'm sure it will be with this storm as well, people taking advantage. A company really shouldn't make you sign over your rights if they're a reputable company. You should be able to handle the funds that are being distributed. They may kind of say, oh, well, we're going to do everything on your behalf. But in the reality is they're putting us in this insurance market that we're in today. From Hurricane Irma, there was more paid out in third-party fees than there were in damages to homes, which we're all consumers. We're all feeling the repercussions of this and why we're seeing these high rate increases across the board, carriers leaving the state. So I do urge you to try not to file or sign an assignment of benefits if you can avoid it. Your agent is your advocate. They're there to help you. If in the event you aren't getting the service that you need, that's always an option. It really should be your option of last resort to do an assignment of benefits.
Right.
And this was a question we had some parishioners ask, a contractor coming and saying, oh, I can repair your roof really quickly, faster than anyone else if you just sign over your insurance settlement to me.
Yeah.
So that's an example for the folks watching here. Just be very cautious of that, as Amanda says.
Exactly. And then they can inflate the costs to really whatever they want to. So your roof, let's just say for an example, your roof's $50,000. Well, they may charge $80,000. So then they're getting all this extra money. It's not going in your pocket. It's going in their pocket, and it's coming off the top of your claim payout. And then in return, it's causing everybody's insurance rates to go up because they're paying so much more than they should on the average claim. So, of course, it's your right to do this if you want to, but I just please, if you can try to go through your insurance company, give them a chance to make it right first. If you're not getting the help you need, reach out to your agent. If they're still not able to help you, then this is the option that you can have as a last resort. Any other questions on AOB? Okay. All right, supplemental claims. So this is something that we saw once again with Hurricane Irma. We're going to see it a lot with hurricanes. The insurance companies have their own software to calculate repair estimates. A lot of times the insurance companies right now are just issuing checks, sending them out, and getting calls concerned that it's not going to be enough to cover their repairs. So what's happening is then you file what's called a supplemental claim. And what that is you get the actual estimate of what it costs to repair or replace the damages to your home. You submit that in, and then the insurance company reviews, and they will submit an additional payment. We see this all the time. It's not that the company's trying to lowball you. They just have this software that they use. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. But if there is a large discrepancy, they may ask for more than one quote, but they're very reasonable in this. It's expected that there's going to be supplemental claims. So don't just assume that because you got a check, that's the end all be all of the payout. It's not. You just need to keep all receipts and photos and everything and you can send that into your adjuster for additional payout.
Is there a time frame, Amanda, under which you can typically file a supplemental claim? Is it limited to typically a year, or?
So technically you have 3 years. I would advise against that because it can be a challenge to determine what the cause of loss was in a 3-year period. We could have additional storms, etc. But technically you do have 3 years. I would try to get it in as soon as possible. I personally had a home after Hurricane Irma that we didn't realize that we had extensive roof damage till 1.5 years after, and I'm an insurance agent. And so we figured that out, sent in the documentation, and then had the repairs done. So you do have time, but the sooner you can get something out, the better. So I know it's hard to get contractors and everything right now, but if you can get estimates and get that submitted as soon as possible, that's the best way.
Just find out.
Okay. So the next one is loss assessment coverage. This is mostly for the condo unit owners. It's an optional coverage that helps protect you if you live in a shared community, an HOA, where you're responsible for a portion of the damage to a common area. Typically on a condo policy, there's going to be $2,000 in coverage included on the policy. Some carriers offer more coverage than that, and it's pretty inexpensive to increase. So if you do have an opportunity to do that, I would recommend it. There's only usually a $0 deductible or $250 deductible that applies, so it's a lower deductible. You don't have your hurricane deductible for this portion of the coverage. With that being said, it does match the coverage that you have on your policy. So flood is not going to be covered. There are a lot of assessments out there from condo buildings right now for flood damages. That's not going to be covered on your current condo policy. They also don't cover cosmetic wear and tear, cosmetic or wear and tear assessments. So if they have to go in and replace all the plants that were lost, that's not going to be covered. It's going to be for things like things that were damaged from wind. So maybe, you know, AC units, roofs, things that were affected by wind, not flood. Any other questions on loss assessment? Loss of use. So this is another big one that we've had a lot of claims on and unfortunately a lot of denials on, because it is to pay for the additional costs you might incur if your home is uninhabitable. So the one thing that we do find is uninhabitable is not uncomfortable. So if you've just lost power to your home, it is uncomfortable, but it's not uninhabitable for the insurance term definition. So if you lost power for a week, they're not going to pay for you to stay in a hotel for a week. If the home is uninhabitable, like the roof is blown off, there's openings that are causing the home to be uninhabitable, then that's where that comes into play. It does cover things like hotels or restaurants. So if you do have an uninhabitable home due to wind, you want to keep all your incurred expenses. If you have to pay to launder your clothes, if you had to hire a dog walker, you know, different things that you would incur that you wouldn't have normally incurred from just living, you want to keep all those receipts. It does not cover flood, as we've talked about before. This is one of the most unfortunate things as an agent that's hard for me to, you know, see with my clients, is that their home's uninhabitable due to flood waters, and there's no coverage for that, and there's not coverage that you can buy. Typically that coverage, the loss of use coverage, is 10 and 20%.
I'm gonna go listen to it.
Oh.
Insurance.
Typically the coverage is included 10 to 20% of the dwelling amount. So if you had your home, once again, insured for 500,000, typically you'd have about 100,000 in loss of use coverage.
Amanda, do you know, so we've heard that it's applicable for the time of the evacuation order. So for example, for Sanibel, the evacuation order came in, Lee County was September 27th. Because the causeway was cut off, would that coverage last until October 19th when the causeway was reopened for traffic, or like what's the end of the evacuation order?
Yeah, typically, especially with Sanibel being kind of a unique situation, typically they should cover it until till there was access to the island, because they can't expect you to go by boat. It has to be a civil order, which I'm pretty sure that they had a civil order on the evacuation. If they just said, you know, to like on inland, if it was just to evacuate and it was, you know, for a 24 or 48 hour period, that's not going to be covered. But if it's a civil evacuation, then typically that is covered on the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Am I on, Amanda?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I want you to explain this, how you get your money if you couldn't live in your condo. Where our condo was basically demolished. Now, we are going to get a room in February for a month. Is that covered under our policy?
So it just depends on your what exactly caused the damage from your building. Typically,
Wind. In our case, the wind. Yeah, we're high enough up. Flood didn't bother our unit.
Okay, so but the building's instability, is that because of flood or because of wind, or your damage had your unit?
Our building is uninhabitable due to both flood and wind. The lower units are flood. Our upper units that we're on is wind.
Okay, so you had damage to your unit from wind.
Yes.
Okay, then if you did, so the issue that we've seen is most people in these high-rise condos or higher floor condos didn't sustain any physical damage to their individual unit. So there would be no coverage that would apply. If your unit was damaged from wind and it's uninhabitable, then you should have that coverage on your policy, and it would be listed under loss of use, which is coverage D as in David.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then you would turn that in if you're covered?
Yep, you would turn that in to your, and it's part of the claim. And then the adjuster would, look at the
Right,
look at everything for you.
okay, thank you.
And all insurance claims are determined by a licensed adjuster at the time of loss. So us as agents, we can advise to how the policy verbiage reads, but we have no control over claim payout. Just so you know, we're not licensed in claims. We are licensed in, knowing and understanding the policy. And of course, we can be there on your behalf if you're not getting the level of service you want from the company. We're kind of your liaison there. But as far as any coverage determination, we're not licensed in claims and can't say, yes, this is covered, or no, this is not covered. The adjuster will determine that.
Amanda, I have two people here that want to ask questions.
Okay.
Scott Chrysler's going to ask first, and then Luann.
Hi, hello, it's Scott. I have two observations, and that's the second from the bottom. Does not cover flood. All we've been talking about half the time or more is flood. Has anybody ever taken this to court? So that it's
So
not covered flood, for goodness sake?
So the flood is excluded from the policy. You have to purchase a separate policy for flood. Typically, people in condo buildings don't purchase flood insurance because there's a master policy and it's very expensive to purchase. And then as far as the loss of use, that's a FEMA policy, which is through the government. They don't include loss of use. So there's really, unfortunately, nothing that anybody, even if you did purchase flood insurance, it's not going to cover loss of use.
I have a question about that flood insurance. We were hit with quite a surge. We have 14-foot piers up to the living part. The walls were all enclosed. We had garage doors and we had a sliding door. All of that was knocked out with the storm surge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that, the adjuster came in and said, yes, your freezer is covered, your dehumidifier is covered, and your condensers are covered. Why is not the walls to the basement undercroft covered?
It depends on when the structure was built. If it was in compliance with FEMA, they have rules and regulations. And unfortunately, there's a lot of structures that do not comply with their rules and regulations. And as you can see, they put these rules in place. Why they have the 18-foot piers and why they don't want them enclosed is for storms like this.
Our duplex owner is reinstalling her part of the walls.
Okay.
Is that something that, how do you feel about that?
It's hard because as a homeowner, I would want it put back because it's extra storage space. But from an insurance standpoint, it's kind of a risk that you're, first of all, they have to comply with whatever the permitting is. And, I'm not licensed in permitting. But then if she does put it back, just know that if there's another storm that it's, not going to be covered. It's just a risk that you'd have to take.
So it's more of a cosmetic.
It's more of a cosmetic thing. And then, of course, you would just want to make sure that she's complying with any permitting so that you don't have issues. Because I know personally on Fort Myers Beach, I've had some clients that finished their downstairs and it was built after a time where that was not allowed and they had to go in and rip everything out. So it's also a compliance issue with the county.
Well, we use it as a garage, a camper stored there.
If it's a storage facility, then that typically is okay. But when it's finished for living area, that's when it's typically a problem.
Go on with that, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
Go on with that, please, that explanation. If it's a storage area.
So typically, if it's a storage area where the walls are unfinished and it's just used for parking, then typically that is okay. You may have to add flood vents to comply with the latest FEMA rules. But if it's finished for a living area and it's below the base flood, typically that's a problem.
A problem
or the county, it's illegal. Then they can have you rip it out.
So, what right do we have then to,
I
go back to
don't want to
the-
get into this with
I
you.
know you don't.
This is
I know.
permitting. Yeah, this is permitting and it's not my wheelhouse. It's something that you'd have to talk to your FEMA coordinator. They can definitely go over what's allowed and what's not allowed. My opinion doesn't really, it doesn't hold ground, so.
I'd love to hear
Uh,
your.
Amanda, we've got Luann Fortune here. I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks again. I'm the
Yeah.
one on the 10th floor with the damage from all different ends. So
Yes.
initially, my building was uninhabitable because of easily claimed flood surge that wiped out all of the controls, the electric as well as the plumbing and all of those pumps. But the roof was also damaged and the entire building is now going through moisture and mold remediation, and the homeowners association has issued an order that owners are restricted from being on site. Do I need to file a new claim with my insurance agency, which has not been responsive to the earlier claim?
So you don't need to file a separate claim. The loss of use and all of the claims relating to the hurricane are one claim. You would just work with your adjuster as far as submitting that letter from the condo building to see if any additional coverage applies. Yeah. Okay. And then we'll open it up to any other generic questions that you guys have.
Reaction.
So questions for Amanda, it's probably going to be easiest
Raise your hand.
to,
Raise your hand into the,
Bob and Joanne.
Bob and Joanne.
Amanda, can you talk about the use of public adjusters and whether in your experience you feel they're effective for the cut they take out of your settlement?
So I view public adjusters, attorneys, the same as an assignment of benefits. I think that there's a place for them, but I personally would try to let the insurance company handle the claim initially. If they're not responding, your agent's not helping you on their behalf and you feel like you're not getting anywhere, then at that time you may want to hire a public adjuster. If in the initial stages, when people are hiring public adjusters and not giving the insurance companies a chance to make it right, I feel like you're just adding to the problem of overpayment of claims.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why you have an agent. So if that's what we're here for. We have my team, we have people that are in place. We have hired 3 extra people just to help us with making calls to carriers on our clients' behalf. So if your adjuster is not getting back to you, which unfortunately, even the best companies that we represent, there's going to be some bad adjusters. It's just due to the volume of this storm. That we have personal relationships with all of the carriers that we write through at our agency. So I'm not calling into 1-800 number. I have reps and contacts at each carrier that we write through. So if one of my clients isn't getting the level of service that they need or expect, then we're contacting our rep and getting somewhere. I'm not going to call into a 1-800 number and them not know who I am and then not get anywhere. So when we started the agency, that was something that was very important to us, is having a personal relationship with the carriers, because it's times like this when you really need them that it makes a big difference.
what if the agents are not responsive? We started with an agent a number of years ago. He since has retired and we're not getting any help from the agents whatsoever. Got a little bit more help from the insurance company themselves.
Mm-hmm. So that can be, a little bit of an issue, a challenge. It's not, something that we like to hear. Just being in the industry, your agent is your advocate. They're supposed to be there for you. You may try to talk to somebody else at the agency. You can always send me an email if it's a carrier that we write through. I'd be happy to, send an email on your behalf if it's one that we write through. If it's one that I don't write through, I can't assist you at all on that claim. And I wouldn't be able to talk to you about the claim, but I could at least, kind of poke them a little bit. But really, if you're not getting anywhere with the agency or the agent, then that's where, sometimes people have to take another avenue.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions for Amanda? John?
Yeah, Amanda, thank you again for your insights. Much appreciated. Maybe a premature question, but something that will be on all of our minds is what's coming down the road in terms of what the next year will look like in terms of both availability of coverage and what might happen relative to likely increases in premiums. So without putting you on the spot, if you put your crystal ball, in front of you here for a moment, do you have any insights that you might be able to share with us in terms of what we might want to see as we try to look down the street and around the corner for what's coming?
So they did suspend, the state of Florida suspended all rate increases until November 30th to let the insurance companies get through hurricane season. The driving force of the insurance rates is the reinsurance costs, which at that point they can negotiate the rates. Because we were in an active hurricane season, it was nearly impossible to do so. So I suspect that we're going to get that information in the next couple of weeks because since the carriers were not able to file till November 30th, they're going to start filing December 1st. I would suspect we're probably going to be in that kind of a range of 10 to 30% increases, depending on the carrier, depending on the location, just from what we've seen historically. The carriers have really tightened up their guidelines during hurricane season. Where I used to have 10 or 15 carriers to quote with, I may have 2 at this time. Once again, I'm very hopeful that outside of hurricane season, the carriers are going to start opening up and we'll have more options. A lot of this in the future is going to be determined by the amount of claims, paid out with AOBs and public adjusters and those types of things that are inflating claims. So hopefully the carriers learned a lot from Irma. I mean, the checks are going out much faster than they were during Irma, which is really good to see. And hopefully that's deterring people from having to use those other resources, which cause the claims to be higher.
So higher costs, probably fewer options.
I would assume so. It's probably going to be a year or 2, 3 before the market stabilizes itself again. Knock on wood, we have calm years in the next coming years. But there's going to be companies that are coming in, and a lot of our carriers have said that they had the reinsurance in place and that they're not concerned. So, as long as we don't, hopefully don't have an active season the next couple of years, then I think we'll be in a good place. And with the legislation, so they're trying to do some things like change the rule from being able to file a claim from 3 years down to 1 year. So if they do get some legislation on these types of things, that will help as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you file a complaint with if you needed to file a complaint?
The Department of Insurance.
So that would be the Florida State Department?
Yes, the Florida Department of Insurance. Yep.
Other questions for Amanda?
Anne Marie, I know you just got on. It has been recorded, so you will be able to go back tomorrow or sometime next week to watch it.
And if you guys have any questions too, after you're thinking about things, or you can always send me an email or give me a call as well. I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation or if things come up along the way. So.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been very enlightening.
Oh, good. I know. I wish some of my stuff, I had better news for you guys, but I just want to be, very transparent, and so you know what to expect, and help as best I can.
Thank you, Amanda.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks. everybody for coming out. Good luck with,
Thank you.
good luck with your insurance and, contractors and all the things that we're dealing with right at the moment.
Yeah, lots of fun.